This is the Diamond Hogs Podcast with Mason Choate and Robert Stewart.
Welcome to the Diamond Hogs Podcast. I'm your host, Mason Choate, joined today by Robert Stewart. As always, we also have Pete D'Alessandro, and producer Christian will be with us later on. He's busy right now, but he'll hop in here later. So Alabama, last series of the regular season. That's what we got coming up this weekend. We're going to have Andrew Hutchinson from HawgBeat.com on the podcast. He kind of we talked more postseason type stuff, like what happens if this happens or what happens if that happens. We talked some X factors, and we just looked ahead to stuff. Talked to RPI because Hutch has been all over the RPI. So that's a great interview. A lot of insightful stuff that we don't always talk about here on the podcast, but we're going to get to some stuff. We'll talk Alabama. That's why Pete is here, because Pete does his in-depth previews for HawgBeat.com on the opposing teams every week. So go check that out. That's why he's here, so we don't have to read it. That's right, Pete. I don't read your work. And then, so it's just going to be a good episode. This is a little different because usually we're in studio. Robert's at home in Virginia. And so we're all going to be on Zoom, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. But before we get to everything, I want to remind you about hitthatline.com. That's where you can listen to our podcast. It's on the Hit That Line podcast network. So go type in Hit That Line wherever you get your podcast, and you can find the Diamond Hogs podcast. You can find all kinds of stuff. You can find the Morning Rush podcast, the Halftime podcast, Trusting the Process with Ty Richardson, all of that over at hitthatline.com. So go there. You can find Robert's recaps from the games as well. And crap, I got locked out of this doc. Anyways, I know it off the top of my head. It's at Hit That Line AR on Twitter, hitthatline.com, or type in Hit That Line wherever you get your podcast. Also, go to HawgBeat.com. That's where we're at on YouTube. Type in HawgBeat wherever you get your YouTube needs, which is on YouTube. And you can find the video version of the podcast. And you can also get all kinds of great stuff. As I mentioned a minute ago, Pete, he does his his previews for HawgBeat.com. And Hutch always has his key takeaway story, which is like 1,600 words of just stats and everything that happened during the games. So go subscribe to HawgBeat.com. It is worth your time. All right, boys. Also, Chinook Seedery. Robert, I tried the cinnamon toast seeds. Oh,
what's the verdict?
Goodness. Holy crap. It's literally like butter and cinnamon in your mouth. It's so good. Pete, have you tried the cinnamon toast?
I haven't tried them yet, but I think I'm going to have to use that DHP10 code to get some.
Yeah, if you want the cinnamon toast seeds or whatever other flavor, use code DHP10 at checkout when you go to ChinookSeedery.com, and you can get 10% off your order. I'm being for real. I'm not just saying this because, yes, we get money when you buy it and you use our code. I'm saying this because it is genuinely really good. The cinnamon toast, like, I didn't want to stop. I had to make myself stop because I only have one bag. But oh my goodness, they're so good.
I was driving home on Monday from Fayetteville to Northern Virginia, and I, like, for all of the morning hours that I was on the road, I had those seeds in my mouth because it was like my breakfast. It was fantastic.
Yeah, you were seed mouthing it in the car.
That's
what you were doing. Yeah. They're like, actually, it's just butter and cinnamon, which is what cinnamon toast is, but it's just they perfected the art of sunflower seeds at ChinookSeedery.com. So go check them out and use code DHP10 at checkout for 10% off your order. All right, boys, what do we want to lead off with? We just talked to Dave Van Horn, and I think, Robert, what's your biggest takeaway? My biggest takeaway is that he still feels good about his starting pitching. He said everybody's healthy. They had good bullpens this week. So going into this weekend, we kind of really talked about Connor Nolan more than the other two, but he seems to feel confident in starting pitching, and I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like from what he said, and the press conference was not very long. It was only 5 or 6 minutes, but I mean, it sounded like the problem was execution, right? As you said, bullpens looked good. They all feel good. None of them are like experiencing any sort of end of season fatigue type deal. We thought that might be an issue with Nolan because there were 2 or 3 outings in a row early on where he threw, 100 or more pitches. But it sounds like all 3 guys, Nolan, Hagen Smith, and Jackson Wiggins, are all feeling pretty good. So, I mean, we can sit here and talk all we want about it, but it's not going to matter until they show up in Tuscaloosa Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you know?
Yeah, that's something that we get to with Andrew Hutchinson later on in the episode, talking about how do you feel about these guys right now? Because you mentioned it. It feels like Connor Nolan, he's been down. What's going on with him? Hutch kind of answered that a little bit. But I think that Arkansas should be confident in their starting pitching. And I had someone comment on one of my Twitter posts. I think it was Tuesday. I posted like a bunch of stats, like, positive stats about Arkansas baseball, and people were in my mentions mad about it. But the one dude said that Connor Nolan is nowhere near, like, he's not even in the same stratosphere as Blaine Knight was in 2018. And just statistically, that is just not true. In some statistical categories, Connor Nolan is better than what Blaine Knight was. And I don't have it in front of me. I know earlier on in the year, maybe 4 or 5 series in, things were very compatible. Like, Connor Nolan was better than Blaine Knight. And so I think it's tough because this team doesn't hit like that 2018 team did. Like, you can just go ahead and say that there's nobody in this lineup that is Heston Kjerstad. I mean, maybe Caden Wallace, but Heston Kjerstad was the number 2 overall pick in the Major League Baseball draft. I don't think Caden Wallace is to that level yet. Whether he stays another year or not, because he will be draft eligible, that is to be seen. But I don't know. I don't know. Robert, did you have any other big takeaways from Dave?
Not really. I mean, it feels like we didn't even get to the offensive talk, right? I mean, you're just going to have to hope for another weekend on the road like you got 2 weeks ago in Auburn. Because, you're coming off of probably the worst performance of the year offensively. I mean, in Sunday's game against Vanderbilt, I realized it was only 7 innings, maybe 6 more outs. They would have been able to come up with something there at the end. But I mean, think about what are the worst games we've seen from this team? Stanford, right? That was like a 3-hit shutout. Missouri State was bad right up until the end. But that Vanderbilt game, I mean, like you said on the last episode, it had notes of the 2018 finals game 3.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, they're gonna have to figure something out at the plate to right that ship for sure.
Okay, so as far as at the plate goes, Pete, this is why we have you here. What does Alabama's pitching look like? Should Arkansas struggle against this pitching staff, or should it be, if Arkansas is not hitting the Alabama pitchers, then something's wrong?
They're actually a decent pitching staff. They're pretty mediocre in the SEC in terms of most of the statistical categories. The one thing about them that sticks out to me is that they give up the fewest walks of any staff in the SEC, and that's kind of what this Arkansas offense has been thriving off of, is drawing walks, extending at bats. And from what I've seen, Alabama is really good at throwing strikes and kind of making the other team put the ball in play to get outs or to score runs. But I mean, none of their pitchers individually kind of like blow me away. It was a lot harder for me to find tape on the pitchers this week compared to past weeks, just because none of these guys, except for Grayson Hitt, who's the Saturday guy, he had some tape on him, but the other guys couldn't really find a whole lot. Alabama's social media, Twitter is kind of lackluster in terms of posting clips of highlights from games. Maybe that's because they don't really make many highlights, but yeah, I think the Hogs shouldn't have a problem this weekend, but Alabama could be sneaky good on the mound.
One of the things that I was looking through is the Tuscaloosa News, which is probably one of their leading news outlets that covers the Crimson Tide. I couldn't find anything on their baseball team. They were talking spring football, they were talking softball, which understandable. I know their softball team's really good, but it sounds like Bama baseball is just not that important.
It reminds me of when we were covering the Kentucky series, and I know basketball was still going on at the time, so that was understandable. But also, I reached out to multiple Kentucky reporters, and most of them were like, yeah, we don't really cover baseball. And I was like, but you have a baseball team and you're in the SEC. You should have somebody covering baseball. I guess it's just different here in Arkansas, but they were in like prime basketball form. And I don't know. I guess you look at a school like Kentucky and that makes sense. You look at a school like Alabama, football's king, basketball's king in Kentucky. And I think in Arkansas, it seems to be like from season to season, the fans kind of like travel with whatever's in season very well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I was looking at another thing with Bama while we're still talking about it. I did misspeak on the last episode. I said that Bama lost 6 of its last 6 series. It's the last 5. So Arkansas winning would make that 6. But over those last 5 series, 14 games, because they had their Sunday game against Auburn canceled. Over those last 14 SEC games, they've scored more than 5 runs only twice, I believe. One of them they beat Tennessee. One of them they beat LSU maybe a couple of weeks ago. So I think if I had to give you a key to this series, it would be score runs, outscore Alabama. Well, I mean, obviously that's the key. That's not a secret, but score a lot of runs and you're probably not going to lose the game.
Yeah, Robert with the great analysis of if you score more runs than the other team, you should probably win the game.
Hashtag analysis.
Yeah, as long as you're not. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, just to like add on to that. They're like in the SEC offensively, they rank last in walks drawn with 184, last in OBP at 360, and last in runs scored. So pretty much what I'm seeing is just a pretty anemic offense. They have one guy over 10 home runs, and he's also struck out like 58 times. So he's kind of like what people think that Brady Slavens is. So how they've been treating Brady Slavens, that guy is that guy. There's just really nothing about them that worries me, that Arkansas couldn't prevent, in my opinion.
Are you talking about Zane Denton?
Yeah, him.
Yeah, he's hitting 254. He's got 12 homers, and he's got 41 RBI. Dominic Thomas, the former Razorback, he's hitting 292, 5 homers, 30 RBI. But I mean, what is his fielding percentage? Let's see, 984, 7 errors. He I haven't watched a lot of Alabama baseball, so I'm not gonna act like I'm an expert. I'm not gonna act like Thomas is terrible behind the dish. But I watched Alabama when they played Tennessee. Thomas had a really rough series. So that's the only Alabama I've watched. Pete, have you watched more Thomas this season?
I haven't, but let me just run you through some of his stats here. So he's batting 292, which is 5th best on the team, but he has a 327 on base percentage because of his 30-11 strikeout to walk ratio, which is the worst on the team. And he has 30 RBI, which is 3rd most, but that's not impressive really. And then defensively, he's tied with Turner Time and Dominic Keegan for most runners caught stealing in the SEC, but has also allowed 38 runners to successfully steal, which is 2nd most in the SEC. And then you said 7 errors. I know he has 6 pass balls, which is 5th most. So, I mean, there's some things he's good at, but it seems like defensively he may be a bit of a liability back there.
Did you say Dominic Keegan?
Yeah, he played first base in the Arkansas series, but he's also a catcher. Yep.
Another thing you mentioned, Pete, is it sounds like what Bama has both issued and drawn the fewest walks in the league.
Yeah, just whenever Alabama's on the field, no one's walking in general on either side, it seems like. So that'll be interesting to see because, I mean, that's kind of been Arkansas's bread and butter at the plate is just walking, getting on base, and then pushing those guys around when they're able to do that. So,
well, and it's been their downfall on the mound too. I mean, think about it. We talked to Hutch about this later. Like it feels like the key stat from Nolan's last few performances is that he's walked 3 or more batters. Mm-hmm. So if Nolan, Smith, Wiggins can keep those bases on balls down, and the Hogs are forced to hit at the plate to score runs, then this could be a really, really productive weekend for Arkansas.
Yeah,
sorry,
go
Mason.
ahead, Pete. Yeah, one last thing. So like in my previews, I look at like 10 major statistical categories, and Alabama only has a better number than Arkansas in 2 of those columns, which is batting average. And that's just because Arkansas is the lowest batting average in the SEC at 272. Alabama as a team bats 280, and then their strikeout to walk ratio is 0.2 of a point better than Arkansas's. Other than that, Arkansas as a team outperforms Alabama in pretty much every facet.
That's so you mentioned Arkansas has the blah 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 blah. What was the batting average? The 272 batting average last in the SEC. That's actually higher than their batting average was on the year last year. It was I posted it. I got to pull it up. 267 last year was their team batting average, and they're hitting 272 this year. So that's a little interesting that they're hitting higher this year, yet they're last in the SEC. And everybody, I mean, I guess the SEC is just hitting better. We do know that, I mean, there were a lot of aces in the SEC that went down. So that could also be something. But back to what Robert was talking about with the walks, especially when it comes to the pitchers walking batters, not the batters taking walks. Like, how many times, Robert, are we sitting in the press box and we're like, just throw strikes? Like, all you have to do is throw it over the plate and trust your defense, which is one of the top defenses in all of America. And I fail to understand why sometimes these guys won't throw strikes. Like, I get it. You're trying to get a strikeout, or you're trying to fool this batter, but just pitch to contact. Dave said it in his press conference. He's trying to get them to pitch to contact. Was he talking about Connor or Hagan when he said, I told him, you just need to pitch to contact more. Let these guys hit it and trust the guys behind you.
I'm pretty sure it was Nolan, but another thing that he always says in press conferences, like when Nolan or Smith or Wiggins or whoever it is struggles, it's like it's not necessarily that they're trying to strike guys out. It's more that like they just don't have command. So it's like how can their bullpens look so good week in and week out, and then they go on the real field where it matters and they just lose it.
Yeah, so if the pitchers, it's the same concept as when we hear that Jace Borafin is hitting the ball really well in batting practice, or Robert Moore is hitting the ball really well in batting practice. Robert Moore is a good hitter. I mean, we know Jace Borafin hit it really well in the fall, but we haven't seen either one of those guys hit it really that good this season. Like, we know Robert Moore, he's had some unlucky at bats, but I really haven't seen it from Jace Borafin aside from a few good hits here and there. Robert, you're the co-host, so
I'm going.
You should probably talk.
No, I got you. Yeah, you're right about that. It feels like I think you and I have learned a lot more personally this year, because we've covered the team so much more heavily, but it feels like a lot of Dave Van Horn's words are empty, right? I mean, think about what did he say the very first press conference of the year? Braden Webb's the best center fielder he's ever had. Is that true?
Yeah. I don't think so, because you had a guy named Andrew Benintendi play in center field at one point. So.
And what else did he say? He said we won't have any problem hitting lefties. His OPS leader, he won't start his OPS leader because he's a lefty and he can't hit lefties.
Yeah, that's I don't think it's just Gregory either, though, because Stovall can't hit lefties. Who else can't hit lefties? Basically everybody who hits left-handed.
Well, and maybe apparently Chris Lanzilli too, because Jace Borafin is starting over him.
The whole Lanzilli thing, I just don't get. I want to ask him about it, but I know that I'm going to get burned when I ask him about it, so I don't. Which is unfortunate, because people are going to call me like a bad media member because I say like I'm too scared to ask a question. I'm not too scared to ask it. It's just I kind of know what the response is going to be. And I can go look at the stats and see that Chris Lanzilli is hitting the ball really well, not just against right-handers, but also against left-handers. And I'm not the baseball coach, and I don't see Chris Lanzilli in practice. So all I can do is look at the stats.
Yeah, if anyone's curious about how Dave Van Horn might respond to that question for Mason, just look at how he's responded to questions about who should start for me. So
yeah. It's not just us. Well, actually, I think it is just us. It's really just you, Robert. It's just you. The entire Arkansas baseball program hates Robert Stewart, for those of you who don't know this, which is unfortunate, because I am associated with you. So then, like, somehow I get some of that hate every once in a while, which is unfortunate. But it's okay. Okay, what do we want to talk about now? So, Pete, what else about Alabama?
Well, I can just take y'all through my whole little analysis of the pitching staff if you would like me to.
That would be wonderful.
Cool. Well, so I'll start out by saying that they had a guy named Connor Prelip, who's a lefty, electric lefty, who was pretty much slated to be their ace this year. And then I believe it was last May, he underwent Tommy John. So I believe he could have been eligible to maybe return at some point this year, but basically opted out of the season. And I was reading, maybe it was like a press conference from earlier in the year where they asked the manager, Brad Bohannon, about it. And he just pretty much said no comment, seemed pretty salty about the whole thing, honestly. But besides that, he's still the number 23 MLB draft prospect. So they're missing a first rounder in the rotation. But regardless, they will go with Garrett McMillan on Thursday. He's a big physical righty, 6'4", 230, from Tuscaloosa, grew up there, went to community college there, and then transferred to Bama for this year. So this is his first year with the Tide. But based on what I've seen from him, he's got a 3-pitch mix, fastball, upper 80s, low 90s with some arm side run. His curveball is a spike 12-6 breaker, and then changeup looks pretty solid as well, about 10, 12 miles an hour in difference from fastball. And he seems to be comfortable going with either to get strikeouts. But he's been their bona fide ace, started every series opener this year, gone at least 5 innings every time, and has pitched at least 100 pitches in every SEC outing. So, I mean, the guy's going to be in the game for a while. At the same time, he's allowed 13 home runs, which is most on the team. And one of his best starts of the year was when they beat Tennessee in the series opener. He was pitching that game. And he has also been named pitcher of the week of the SEC once too. But yeah, that's what I got on McMillan. And then moving on to Jacob Mcnary, who will start on Friday. He's a veteran guy, senior. Pretty similar pitch mix to McMillan, looking at low 90s, but he throws more of a sinker that has a lot of horizontal run into a righty. And then he throws a spike curveball as well, but it's more of a horizontal breaker as opposed to 12-6. And then he likes to throw a circle change a lot too. So he's another guy that can go to either off-speed pitch for strikeouts. And then I have that he started off rocky in SEC play against A&M and Ole Miss, but in his last 5 starts hasn't allowed more than 3 earned runs in any of those. So he's been pretty good lately. He could prove to be an issue for the Hogs. We'll see. And then the final guy is Grayson Hitt, who is that lefty I mentioned earlier. Coming out of high school, he was the number 1 lefty in Tennessee, and the 81st overall draft prospect overall, and is elected to go to Alabama instead. And even though he had some tape, I couldn't really find a whole lot about him since he's been in Alabama. So I could only find proof of 2 pitches for him, which is a fastball that is up to 95 and a slider, a curveball that is his clear second pitch. Whether or not he has a changeup, I don't know. I couldn't find proof. But he's kind of the Jackson Wiggins of their staff, where he has a lot of potential, really good fastball, but you really never know what you're going to get out of him. To emphasize that, here are his lines from his last 4 starts. We got Tennessee, 3 2/3 innings pitched, 7 earned runs on 7 hits, 3 walks, and 2 strikeouts. And then he had his best start of the year immediately after that against Georgia. He had no runs allowed in 6 innings and struck out 7. And then against South Carolina, only made it 2 innings, gave up 5 runs. And then LSU, which was his last start because the Auburn game got canceled, have 4 2/3 innings pitched, 6 runs allowed on 9 hits. So he's kind of a mixed bag, but Alabama is 8-4 when he starts. So usually him on the mound is a good thing for the Tide.
Hey,
I have one more thing here. But I see our time's running thin on the Zoom meeting here. But Christian, I've been thinking about this all week. This is completely off topic, but how on earth did the raccoon fall through the roof? Like how explain what happened there. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. So yeah, as I was saying on the other episode, so I work with the marketing team in our booth. So behind the booth is that office, and I guess they were living in the ceiling in between like the first floor offices and the suite level. So like, and they're living, yeah, they're just like living above there. And I don't know how they fell exactly, but Jeff was back there getting some supplies, and one of them just fell through the ceiling, and it was just like the funniest thing ever. And he said there was another one like hanging on, and like it crawled back up inside the ceiling. So yeah,
Almost two rally raccoons, but
yeah, I'm glad that Robert decided to interrupt me there to ask a question about the raccoon as we were talking about Alabama baseball. So, all right, we're gonna get into our interview with Andrew Hutchinson now. It's a one that we always enjoy because he's one of the best. He's probably the best in the business when it comes to covering Arkansas baseball. So he gives you guys plenty of insight on what's going on. And as I mentioned, we talk postseason stuff. So everybody is curious about what's going to happen in these next few weeks as far as regionals, super regionals, SEC tournament, all that. We get into that with Hutch, RPI, all that. So here is Andrew Hutchinson.
The Diamond Hogs Podcast is the premier Razorback baseball podcast.
All right, we now welcome on a man that everybody who follows Razorback baseball knows. It's Andrew Hutchinson from HawgBeat.com. Hutch, we haven't had you on. I guess it was after the Missouri series, either after or before the Missouri series that we had you on. So it's been a minute. I just want to kind of gauge where you're at mentally because we're about to hit postseason and you need to be right about where you're at mentally because it's about to get even crazier than it has been.
Yeah, man, it's a crazy time of year. Luckily, the good news is that baseball is pretty much the only thing going on at this point. Much better than the last time we talked, when I think basketball was still happening, spring football was still going on. So at least now I can devote my time fully to the Diamond Hogs, and it's been a roller coaster of a season, kind of. I mean, even though there's still a unanimous top 10 team in the country, it's been a little bit interesting, a lot different than last year, that's for sure. So I know it's worn on fans, and it's a little bit worn on me just because the fans are so kind of not happy, I guess you could say. They're very not too fond of this team, but I still think that they could change that if they manage to make a deep run in the postseason.
yeah. So let's get right into it. You mentioned the fans not being happy. Another statistics that sort of backs that up, maybe I guess, is RPI. Where do you come down on that whole situation right now? And I mean, do you think any of the unhappiness is justified?
Yeah, I mean, the RPI, I checked today. As of this recording, I think they're 26th. That's not terrible, but also not anywhere close to where you want to be if you're a top 8 national seed. And I think that's what Arkansas fans have come to expect because it's happened the last 3 postseasons. So I think that has something to do with it. The fact that they just there's certain aspects, like, for example, I'll think back to the Texas A&M series when they had runners on second and third, no outs, 7th inning or later, and they couldn't get it done in 1-run games. And just a hit in one of those games, you win that series, and you're sitting in firm control of the SEC West at this point. They didn't get it, and here they are tied with the Aggies going into the final weekends. And you need to win more games than Texas A&M in order to clinch the title outright and be the number 2 seed in the SEC tournament. So I think there's definitely some reason to be frustrated with this team, but I also don't think they're terrible. Like, if you ask some Arkansas fans, they'll tell you they don't even deserve to be ranked in the top 25, and they're just terrible. But it's not that's not the case. They're just not as good as maybe they were definitely not as good as last year, and maybe not as good as they were in 2018 or 2019. But that's not to say they're not still a really good team.
Yeah, so when it comes to the seeding conversation, Robert and I talk about it a lot because we have an investment in it because we're going to Hoover and we don't want it to be the 9:30 a.m. game, which would happen if they're the 2 seed in the SEC tournament. So, basically if A&M wins the West, Arkansas plays the 9:30 a.m. game. There's other factors, but that's kind of where it's going. And so that's why we have something in it. But everybody, when I tweet out like this is what's going on, everybody's like, why do you care? Why does it matter? A&M is better than Arkansas. They own the tiebreaker. Why is it that Arkansas fans are just so like unhappy and angry and they don't want to say a good thing about this team? And when you do say a good thing, they have something to complain about. Like, is this something that has shocked you, or have you come to just be okay with it?
You get used to it, honestly. I mean, I guess I've been covering the team for about almost a decade now, and I can't tell you how many times that they lose a midweek game they shouldn't lose, and it's just the end of the world. Like the Missouri State game a couple of weeks ago, they lost that. Previous years, I know they've lost like Memphis and things like that in the midweek, and fans just lose their minds. But I think it's because a lot of them, and this isn't necessarily a shot at the fans, it's just kind of a fact. They have this football mentality because most of Arkansas fans, they're football fans first. I mean, that's the cash cow for Arkansas, both for the U of A itself and for media people and everything. And in football, one loss is devastating. It can knock you out of an SEC West race. It can knock you out of a bowl game, things like that. So that's kind of the mentality they have. But baseball, it's 56 games in the regular season usually. That's a lot of games. And I think that sometimes fans lose sight of that, and that it's a winding road. I mean, I remember one year Florida won the national championship and they had midweek losses to Stetson and I can't remember all the teams. They lost to several midweek games that they probably shouldn't have lost. And I always reference that. I always reference when Arkansas lost a game to Texas in the midweek down in Austin. I think it was 2019, and Arkansas made it back to the College World Series. Texas nosedived after that, and they were, just bottomed out. And I don't even know if they made the postseason. So you can't put too much stock in any one game. And so I think that that's kind of the root of everything is fans just don't quite, unless you've been really following baseball for a long time, they don't fully understand kind of just the up and down nature of the sport and of college baseball specifically. And of course, I think there's also still some residual frustrations from not winning it in 2018, being so close and coming up short, not making it back to Omaha last year when they were the number one team all year. I think that frustration is starting to build. And I think maybe you can kind of see it. I'm trying to think of comparisons, maybe like Gonzaga in basketball. They're like, oh, well, we made it to the Final Four. We made it to the national championship game. We need to win one. And I think there's some kind of growing frustrations there. It's very similar with Arkansas baseball. They really need to win a national title so Arkansas fans can just, be happy. But I tell people all the time, winning a national championship in any sport is really, really difficult, especially so in baseball.
And I mean, none of these games that they're playing right now really even matter in the grand scheme of things. It's going to be about how they play, the next 3-4 weeks. So, moving on to actual gameplay right now, one of the things we've talked about recently is Connor Nolan and how it seems like he hasn't really had his stuff for a while now. What do you make of how he's performing, and I mean, how does he move forward from this, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're going to be talking to Dave Van Horn later today, and I'm actually going to ask him about that because Connor just hasn't quite been himself. I think it's been about 4 starts in a row now where he's walked 3+, given up several earned runs, and just has not been as dominant as he was up to that point. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, he was on track to have a season very comparable to Isaiah Campbell did in 2019. Which is crazy to think about because I thought he was going to be good this year, but I didn't think he was going to be that good. So I don't know if it's like him, wearing down because he was throwing a lot of innings early on, but he is a senior, so you'd think he's built up for that. It's not like a Hagen Smith, for example, being a true freshman. You expect a guy like that to maybe hit a freshman wall or something. Connor Nolan's been doing this forever, so I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if it's just a matter of not quite having his stuff. I know there was a game in there where I thought that he didn't get the benefit of a questionable strike zone, but you can't put that on all those games. So I think it's just a mix of multiple different things, and I think this weekend is going to be really big to see how he does at Alabama, to see if he can get back on track before going into the postseason.
So moving forward with this team, kind of on the same topic, who do you see as an X factor of this? If this guy is playing to his potential, this team is going to go far in the postseason. Or maybe there's a few of them. With baseball, it's normally probably more than one, whereas like with basketball or football, you can kind of point out one or two guys. But is there anybody on the top of your mind? I think I heard you and Andrew Ellis talking about X factors in the press box last weekend against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, because I go back and forth. There's two guys, and they're both pitchers that I think could be just really, really big for Arkansas. Assuming Connor Nolan gets back to normal, assuming Hagen Smith gets back to where he was looking earlier in the year. But I think it's Jackson Wiggins, your Game 3 starter. If he can pitch to his potential, he's incredible. But then if he doesn't, it blows up quickly, and then you're scrambling, and you only get an inning or two out of him, and it's just puts a stress on your bullpen. And then along those same lines, I think Will McIntyre is a guy that could be a big time guy for them. If he can eat up 3, 4, 5 innings out of the bullpen, like say a Jackson Wiggins has to have a short start or a Hagen Smith has to have a short start, you could see him do kind of what he did in game 2 of the Vanderbilt series, where the game got postponed in the middle of the 6th inning. They start the game the next day, and Will McIntyre threw the final 3 innings. I think a long relief kind of person like that, kind of like a Jake Reindl was in 2018, would be huge for this team. So those are the two guys I really look at. I'm sure you can make a case for some guys offensively. Like if a Robert Moore shows up and hits like we think he's capable of doing. We've seen some glimpses of that. I think that would be huge. But really, those two pitchers right there, if you can shut other teams down, you don't have to do quite as much offensively to win games.
It seems like over the last few weeks, as midseason turns into late season, we've seen a lot of lineup tinkering, maybe more than normal from a Dave Van Horn team, or at least certainly compared to last year. But the 4 spots that seem like they've really been up in the air are the corner outfields, first base, and DH. So if you're Dave Van Horn, who starts where and why?
I'll start with the corner outfield spots. I really think that that's going to be more of or if I was the guy making the decisions, I would make that more of a platoon type situation. Because I think we all know Zach Gregory struggles against left-handed pitching. I was very surprised when he started game 3 against Vanderbilt's lefty, though. That was very interesting decision, especially considering up until that point, Dave had been pretty consistent about, okay, the reason Zach Gregory's not playing is because he doesn't hit lefties as well. Borfin hits lefties better. Lanzilli, I think, hits righties and lefties about the same. So that's what I would do if I was Dave Van Horn, is I would just base it off of the matchups. And maybe there's different pitchers that pitch well against lefties or righties or whatever. And you can just kind of tinker it from there. That's how I would handle it. I would handle it as more of a platoon matchup situation. And then at first base and DH, I feel like Slavens has to be in the lineup, because he's another guy that if he hits to his potential, he's huge for your offense. And I think I like him at first base. I know he botched a ground ball that was a big time play in this past weekend. But I mean, I think he's got to be in the lineup, and Peyton Stovall he struggled this year. But again, he's a guy that has hit really well against, I think, right-handed pitching. I'd have to go back and look, but I think he's hitting over 300 against righties, but also really struggles against lefties. So maybe you have a little bit of platoon there. Maybe you could DH him some. I know Kendall Diggs is, had some really big swings, a couple of critical 3-run home runs, including a walk-off. So that's a guy that could play. I know Dylan Leach got to start at DH this past weekend. That was really interesting. It's also risky. If something happens to Michael Turner behind the plate, what do you do there? If you need to give Michael Turner a day off or whatever, you want to get Leach in the lineup, maybe you can put Leach at catcher and Turner at first. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say without knowing exactly Dave Van Horn's comfort level with them as defenders. Like, I don't know, Michael Turner, I think he's fine at first base, but is he close enough to Peyton Stovall or Brady Slavens that you'd feel comfortable putting them there? I'm not 100% sure. So lots of still things kind of moving, and I think, and I'm not sure if Dave's going to get one settled in. I think it's going to keep shuffling throughout the rest of the season, just because that's kind of what he's been doing the last several weeks.
So I want to look at the postseason real quick, because I feel like with Alabama, you're playing at Alabama, a team that's not one of the top teams in the SEC. Some of us are overlooking that, and as media, we're allowed to do that. The team can't do that, but we can. I look at this and I think you mentioned it earlier in the interview, but people are spoiled because Arkansas has hosted a regional and a super so often recently, but in my mind, I'm thinking this team needs to host a super regional because you want Hagen Smith and you want Jackson Wiggins to be pitching at home in the super regionals. That's the way I look at it. But if, like, historically, it's fine if Arkansas is not hosting a super regional. Like, they can go on the road and win a super regional somewhere else. How confident are you that they could do that? And maybe, I guess, calm some people down about it's okay if they don't host a super regional.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the first things first, they got to get to where they can secure a regional host. I know a lot of people that I've been hearing, on the radio or on the message boards or social media, they're all like, well, a regional host is locked. But if they don't win this series against Alabama and their RPI is not very good already, they could fall out of the top 16. And that would be just an absolute disaster, because you'd like to at least host a regional at Baum-Walker Stadium. But they have gone on the road, like you said. I mean, 2015, they went to Oklahoma State in the regional, won that. Then they came back because Missouri State couldn't host. I know back in 2012, they won a super regional in Waco. 2009, I think it was Tallahassee, I want to say. And I think they had to go on the road for regional those years too. So they have gone on the road and done it. But like you said, just kind of based on this year track record, you're pitching with your two starters that aren't named Connor Nolan are vastly different at home than they are on the road. So you want to host, but again, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because to me, this team, whether or not they can make a deep run is going to solely depend on if they get hot and live up to and they peak at the right time, as they say. If they get hot and they play up to their potential. That could be whether it's on the road or at home, either way, because I just don't think they've hit that yet. And if they don't live up to their potential, then they could get beat in a regional. That's just kind of how it is. I don't necessarily think the venue is going to dictate that. I think it's just a matter of them all getting hot at the right time. That's what happened back in 2009. I think they lost like their last 8 regular season games that year, and they were not very good at all. And all they do is they go to Oklahoma, win that regional, go to Tallahassee, win that regional, and boom, they're in the College World Series, and I think make the semifinals. So to me, it's all about, can they live up to the potential that's there, that we thought was there at the beginning of the year, but haven't seen pretty much, but only for a few spots here and there along the way.
So we were talking about X factors and pitchers earlier. Another one I want to bring up is Brady Tygart, because he's had a couple of rough outings in a row. I mean, the one against Vanderbilt, he was throwing really well. I think he got through 2 innings before he gave up that home run to Bradfield. But I haven't really understood the hate so far. But what do you think? When do you think is the appropriate time to panic if he maybe continues to struggle?
Well, at this point, if he struggles again, it's probably going to be either, if it's in Alabama, it could cost you hosting a regional. If it's in the SEC tournament, well, who cares about the SEC tournament? If it's in a regional, it could be sending you home. So I don't really think you're going to have too much time to panic. There probably is a somewhat of a level of concern, just because it has happened a couple of times now. But it hasn't been like he's gone out there and just gotten shelled. That's, I think, that something that people kind of overlook is, yeah, he may get an L by his name, but that's just because of, one bad pitch. And I mean, the Bradfield home run, I still don't know how he went down and got it out of the ballpark. I mean, he kind of like reached for it and it went out. That wasn't a terrible pitch. So I don't know, I'm not quite ready to hit the panic button on him yet. I think he's very, very good, but he's also still a freshman, and you may not want to maybe push him quite as much. If you're going to ask him to go 3 innings or something like that, then bad things could happen. Ideally, you just need to throw him out there for the 9th inning in a 2-run ball game or something, and he can just go out there, boom, 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 you're done and you win. But if it's tight, close game, tied game, something like that, and you have to send him out there in the 7th, then I think that's where things could get tricky. So it's going to be interesting to see how Dave Van Horn kind of manages that moving forward.
So I had a different question planned, but D1 Baseball just came out with their latest postseason projection, Field of 64 story, whatever they do. They have Arkansas as the 13 seed hosting a Fayetteville regional with it was the same regional they had projected last week with Arkansas as the 6th seed, Southeast Missouri State, Texas, and Louisiana Tech as a 13 seed. Okay, so just Hutch, give your reaction to that.
Well, that's a tough regional. I mean, my goodness. We know, SEMO is the 4th seed, but that's a quality baseball team. We've seen them come in here for non-conference games. Louisiana Tech, I haven't followed them very closely this year, but I know that's a very good program. And then, of course, Texas. That was the number 1 team in the country earlier in the year. So that would be a really, really, really tough regional. You would probably like to maybe win a little bit more here down the stretch, so maybe you can get a more favorable draw. But man, that would be an absolutely loaded regional. It is good to hear that they're still in the top 16, because I kind of wondered, with them being 26 in the RPI and losing the series to Vandy, I didn't know where they were going to have them slotted, but I think they may be kind of assuming a series win at Alabama. I think if you win 2 out of 3 this weekend, then that locks it up. But man, that is a tough draw if that's how it plays out.
Yeah, I was looking at that story just now too. It says Vanderbilt's the 14th seed. So going back to last weekend, the Commodores are a much better team than their conference record would indicate, right?
Oh, absolutely. I made the comment to our on our Vanderbilt Rivals site. I told them that that's the best 14-13 SEC team I've ever seen, just because they're so incredibly talented. It's another team that was number 1 at one point during the season. Bradfield was incredible. That was probably one of the best individual performances I've seen by an opponent at Baum-Walker Stadium. He was incredible, but I've heard from some people saying that, they just kind of seem to be turning it on. They just won a big series the weekend before coming to Baum. They win a big series against the Razorbacks, and now they got LSU coming to town. I think that's a team, kind of like what I'm saying about Arkansas, is if they can get hot at the right time, like what it seems like Vanderbilt's doing, it would not surprise me at all to see Vanderbilt playing in Omaha at this point because they've gotten hot. If Arkansas can do that, then I could see them making a run as well. But it's just a matter of, okay, when's it going to happen? I honestly thought it might happen starting with the Auburn series. I thought that was going to be a big, maybe launching point, and then they have the setback, the next weekend at home.
Hutch, I'm curious, as far as the Alabama series goes, what are you expecting? Because I haven't watched a whole lot of Alabama baseball. I'm sure you've taken a little bit of a look into it. They do have Dominic Thomas, former Razorback player. He's playing catcher for them. I assume he still is. Like I said, I haven't been watching them. But what do you think of this Alabama series? Do you think Arkansas will go down there and not have much trouble with them?
Well, this is an Alabama team that early in the season was looking like a potential top 25 team. They were playing really well, had some decent wins, started off conference play pretty well. And then it's kind of fallen apart the last couple of weekends. Now they're kind of on the verge of maybe missing the SEC tournament. But you figure Missouri is going to be one of the 2 teams that misses the SEC tournament. And then it's either, maybe Mississippi State, maybe it's Kentucky. But I think Alabama's going to sneak into the Hoover, but they're going to need to probably win the whole thing to make the NCAA tournament. So they're either going to be playing for their lives and be extra motivated, or they will have already mailed it in and be ready to just call it a year. Whichever one, we'll probably find out, game one, which team that is. And maybe it's a team where if you punch them in the mouth early, they'll fold, because they haven't won a lot of games of late. And I know that can kind of snowball. And we saw it at Arkansas in 2016 where they lost, I think, their last 13 games or something like that. And they just found ways to lose that year. So to me, I could see it going really well for Arkansas, but I'm also not going to sit here and say, well, I guarantee a series win, because it is a team that has had talent, through the years. And, at least Dominic Thomas is going to be inspired to play. And I would imagine, I'm guessing, just thinking of competitors and being in the SEC, that they'll be ready to go and try to, make a run to the postseason.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I said on the last episode that Alabama have lost 6 of their last 6 series. And so they are very much going to be playing, for their lives this weekend. And yet this afternoon, I bet Dave Van Horn tells us that you're not going to be able to take them lightly.
As you would expect.
Okay. Hutch, I guess that's going to be it from us, man. But we'll probably have you back on in the postseason at some point, because you're a lot smarter than us when it comes to covering baseball. So, and you provide people with better insight than we do, because we just sound like idiots when we talk about it. So,
nah, you got to start somewhere. I was in y'all's chair not too long ago, so hopefully there is a long postseason to be talking about here over the next couple months, and we're talking well into June.
that sounds good. All right, Hutch, go subscribe to HawgBeat.com if you haven't already, and get all of Andrew Hutchinson's content there. And thank you for talking to us, Hutch.
Yep, no problem. Anytime.
All right, see you.
You're listening to the Diamond Hogs Podcast with Mason Choate and Robert Stewart.
Big thanks to Andrew Hutchinson, and he was brought to you by the Encore Group. We've been mentioning it, but we have exciting news from them. Matt Grissom, he found out he's the Torchbearer Award winner, which means he's one of the top 40 real estate agents under 40 within all of RE/MAX nationwide. And that's out of 135,000 agents. That's just insane. And it's only achievable with a proven track record of getting results for his clients time and time again. So if you're in the market to buy or sell a home, visit sellingarkansas.com and let Matt and his team show you why they are the best of the best when it comes to selling real estate in Central Arkansas. Okay, guys. I don't know how I want to end this. It kind of all got thrown for a loop because D1 came out with their new field of 64 projections, and Arkansas is a 13 seed. So I kind of want to talk about that. Robert, you and I talked about this right after we got done with Hutch, but I feel like if Arkansas wins the series against Alabama, at least 2 out of 3, and then they win I think they probably need to win 2 games in Hoover, that would secure them a top 8 seed. Can you agree?
Yeah. I mean, I think the committee or whoever it is really, really values road series wins. So finish on a really high note in the regular season. And like I told you in Hutch, play into the weekend, right? Win 2 games, get yourself to the semifinal. And then, that gives you a chance to make even more noise against really high RPI teams like Auburn, like A&M, like Vanderbilt. And, maybe one of those teams you beat en route to the semifinals. So, yeah, win the series. Ideally, you sweep it because this Alabama team's kind of reeling. But again, like we said, they're playing for their lives. So maybe it's a little trickier, but you got to take 2 out of 3. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. And even if they don't host a regional or a super regional, you look back, the 2009, 2012, and 2015, all of those, they didn't host a regional, and they made it to the College World Series every single one of those years. So it's possible. It's much more difficult. And as we talked about with Hutch, and I think most people know, these pitchers, Hagen Smith and Jackson Wiggins, to be specific, they need to be pitching at home. I think that's just the case when postseason comes around. It'll be interesting to see what they do in Hoover as far as pitching goes, because if they do play more than however many games. And before I get ahead, I think Dave Van Horn's already said that they're planning on Will McIntyre starting the first game in Hoover. That's what he said, but we also mentioned that some of the stuff he says doesn't really mean anything. So do we still believe that that's going to happen, Robert?
Yes. This time, yes, I do. I mean, that's going to be on Wednesday, presumably. Chances are you're probably not going to start Noland or Smith or Wiggins, who pitched Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So I would not be surprised to see McIntyre actually start on Wednesday.
All right. Well, since we have 4 people here, we can do a little college game day type score or series prediction thing. We'll let who should go first? Okay, Robert, you want to go first?
Yep, I got to get out of here. So I'm going to say
Oh, okay. So you don't care about the podcast. I'm going to stall for 5 minutes right now. So you
perfect.
What? I'm
Connor
sorry.
Noland's
Hold on.
gonna bounce back.
Hold on. I have to say something. Wait, I forgot.
Okay. Connor Noland, he's going to bounce back. He's going to earn his what number win is he on? I don't know. It feels like he hasn't won a game in a while. He's going to get the win. I'll say quality start even. Walks are going to be down. Strikeouts may not be up, but that's okay because he doesn't need strikeouts to be an effective pitcher. I'm going to say Hagen Smith starting on a Friday is going to be a good thing. Can't explain why, but I think he's struggled on the road. And then I don't know if we're going to see as good an outing from Jackson Wiggins on Sunday, but I think Saturday. I think the bats will explode in the regular season finale. They're going to give this team some confidence heading into postseason play. I dare say the Hogs will sweep this weekend.
Whoa, that's a bold prediction. All right. Christian, go ahead.
All right. Well, it's going to sound a lot similar to Robert's. I really do feel like they're going to sweep. They're going to sweep in Bama or at Bama this weekend. Connor's going to have a great game. Hagen, I feel like he's going to have the same type of start. He might struggle a little bit. He might even get pulled early, but I think they're going to win that one still. And then I'm going to say I think Wiggins might have his best start of the season to end the year. I really, really like the way he pitched against Vandy, even though, it didn't turn out the way he wanted to. But, I think he did a really good job. And I think Mason is going to pick Caden Wallace as his weekend MVP for the 3rd week in a row. That's one of my predictions as well. Because I think Caden's going to have a great weekend as well.
Okay. All right. Well, now I'm not going to do that since you predicted that, just so you can be wrong. All right. Peter D'Alessandro, go ahead.
Yeah, I got to say impeccable pronunciation first. And I kind of got screwed because y'all just made like 10 predictions instead of 2.
For real. That's what I'm thinking. Robert had like 16 bold predictions. That's not a bold prediction. That's just like, I'm going to say everything that could possibly happen. So I'm right at some point.
Well, yeah. So this is what I was thinking all along. I'm going to go ahead and say Arkansas goes into Tuscaloosa and sweeps the Tide in a very decisive regular season finale series. I think they need the sweep for RPI's sake and for national seeding in the tournament. So I think that they kind of know that going into the series, and we might see a team that we didn't see last weekend against Vanderbilt. So I think the Hogs get the sweep done, even though Christian and Robert already said that. So I guess it's not really a bold prediction at this point, but 3 or 4 of us have a sweep.
It's going to be devastating for the Diamond Hogs podcast if the Razorbacks don't sweep this weekend.
I haven't made my prediction yet, boys. I'm guessing, or I'm predicting Arkansas wins 2 out of 3. That was what I was going to go with the whole time, and everybody said sweep, and I'm like, what am I missing here? But I'm going to go 2 out of 3. I think that they lose No, it won't be a rubber match. I think they lose on Saturday. I think that's just one where they're going to drop it. Wiggins, he struggled on the road. I think that they'll win the Thursday and Friday games. You'll get your starts out of Nolan to Smith. My bold prediction is Evan Taylor in his home state of Alabama. He goes 5 innings total in 2 separate outings and does not give up a run. That's my bold prediction. I'm only doing 1 because that's how bold predictions work. So
Hey, we didn't ask for bold predictions, so I just threw them out there. All right.
Yeah, you threw them. Yeah, plural. So, okay. So we got 3 sweeps, 1, 2 out of 3, and then like 15 bold predictions. So,
My main bold.
Go ahead.
Sorry. My main bold prediction is going to be Wiggins' start. I think Wiggins is going to have his best start of the year.
Okay, so one of us is going to be wrong because I predicted that he loses or he doesn't have a good start. So we'll see. I will say last time, and I did this on the trough over at HawgBeat.com. Last time I predicted that Jackson Wiggins wasn't going to have a good day was when he played. It was the A&M series when he gave up like 5 runs. And was that in the first inning or the second inning? First inning, yeah. So I was right last time, so I might just have a crystal ball on Jackson Wiggins. So I might need to start predicting that he has good games for his sake. Maybe he should come on the podcast. Then he would do really good though, because it's statistically proven if you come on the podcast.
He probably doesn't have that much to say though.
No, if you go watch a Jackson Wiggins press conference, he is a man of few words. Okay, but Thursday, Arkansas, Alabama, 6:00. That's game 1. Friday, 7:00. Game 2. That one's on the SEC Network, and then Saturday 1:00 to close out the regular season in Tuscaloosa. And we'll talk to you guys on Monday.
You've been listening to the Diamond Hogs podcast. Follow the guys on Twitter at Choate Mason and at drstew32.